In this session, we will be discussing the Sankhya metaphysics, a part of Sankhya metaphysics known as PURUSA. The previous classes that we have discussed that how Sankhya prescribes in a doctrine or a theory known as Satkaryavada, which says the effect exists in its material cause prior to its production. If this is so, then they also claim that Prakriti is a reality, is an eternal reality, is ubiquitous, all pervading, is the sole cause for all the objects and non-objects exist in this earth. So, they claim that Prakriti is eternal, Prakriti also all pervading, and it is beyond creation and destruction. Henceforth, they establish the Prakriti as an eternal reality. Now, the question arises whether the Prakriti itself, the material cause itself, capable of producing the different objects in this world that we verify, that we know through our sense experience. Sankhya claims that the material cause itself, though is capable of producing some objects in this earth, but it needs some efficient cause. For example, a wood automatically cannot be converted into a table or chair. A carpenter is needed, by using the wood can create a table, chair, so and so forth. So, if you consider table and chair as an effect, wood is a cause, a carpenter is its efficient cause who really involves to bring out the effect from the material cause. So, therefore, Purusa, the efficient cause, is nothing but the Purusa involved here to create the different objects in a different shapes, different size, to create the different animals for different purposes, also to create the universe in a particular order, so that the harmony will be maintaining. Now, in this class we will again discuss in relation to Satkaryavada and Prakriti, we will see that what is Sankhya's contribution for the existence of Purusa, and how Sankhya describes the Purusa in their own way and establishes that there are two eternal reality, one is Prakriti and Purusa exists in this universe, and henceforth these two causes responsible for creating all the objects in this earth. When Prakriti comes close to the Purusa, Purusa comes close to the Prakriti, so the three gunas Sattva, Raja, Tamas of Prakriti get disturbed. Sometimes they have a homogeneous in their nature when they get disturbed, sometimes they are heterogeneous in nature. When they are heterogeneous in nature, Sattva guna try to dominate other two, that is Rajas and Tamas. Rajas guna also tries to dominate Sattva and Tamas, and Tamas guna try to dominate Sattva and Rajas. Henceforth, in this kind of losing the tranquility, the creation starts. The objects that we see in this earth, the animals that we see in this earth, are just because of evolution, and the evolution starts when Purusa and Prakriti both are coming close together. So, then only evolution starts. Now, my first slide will be reminding you that Sankhya metaphysics, that when we have said that Sankhya philosophy subscribes the theory or the principle or the doctrine theory of causation, it is said that the every effect that we see exists in its material cause prior to its production. An example can also help you to understand or recapitulate what we have discussed in the previous classes. If curd is the effect, then curd lies in its material cause milk prior to its production. Sankhya theory says that if the milk is not capable of producing curd, that means curd can be derived from any other this material causes, for example stone, seeds, so and so forth, but which is not the case. By counter arguing against Nyayikas and Jainism, they said that in this earth we find both subtle objects as well as gross objects. Gross objects like table, chair, pen, duster, computer, etc. Subtle objects like mind, intellect, ego, ahankara, etc., etc. Now, Sankhya theory, as you know, again counteract this Nyaya Vaisheshika, Jainism and others, and saying that can you claim that earth, water, air, fire, these 4 atoms create the subtle elements in this earth. In this sense, Nayakas and others did not say anything, but however, they claim that with the different proportion of water, earth, air and fire, all the objects that we see in this earth are produced. However, Sankhya reject this argument and claim that it is not so. So, there is only one reality responsible for creating the whole objects, both subtle and gross objects in this earthly life. It is nothing but the Prakriti, which is known as Pradhana, the ultimate cause. No one can ask what is the cause of Prakriti. Being an ultimate cause, it is beyond from the creation and destruction, it is eternal, ubiquitous, and also find in all the objects of the world in a different proportion of its gunas. That means, the objects that we see in this earth, the animals that we interact with them, in all the cases you find either sattva or rajas or tamas guna in a different proportion. Hence, for all the objects prior to its production exist in one cause known as Prakriti, which is a material cause. When they describe Satkaryavada, they said that Satkaryavada also has 2 forms, one is Vivartavada, another is Parinamavada. But Sankhya theory prescribes, or Sankhya theory close to this Parinamavada, because Parinamavada, it is stated that the effect is a real modification of the cause. That means, if Prakriti is subtle and its effect will be gross objects, then it is said that it is the real transformation. That means, when it is transformed, you never see the subtle material in that gross object. Henceforth, Sankhya theory establishes Satkaryavada and also establishes that Prakriti as a principle or material cause for creating the whole objects in this universe. Now, let us discuss further how Prakriti being established by Sankhya. The Prakriti is the root cause of all worldly objects. Everything except Prakriti has a cause. Mind, body, senses, intellect, as I said, both gross and subtle objects are the products of Prakriti. Further, they said that being a cause for all the objects that we see in this earth, it is beyond the causality. If it is not so, then it will be related like an objects. It is also bounded with creation and destruction. However, Prakriti, after creating all these objects, detached from all the objects and find itself as an eternal. It is the first cause, and henceforth it is known as Pradhana. It is described by Sankhya as dynamic, it is a ever dynamic, eternal, unconscious and ubiquitous. It is unconscious. Prakriti is unconscious in one hand, and on the other hand it is an active. Being an active, it helps to create the objects in the universe. Just because of activeness, it cannot create the objects of this universe. It needs some efficient cause, because it is the efficient cause who thinks that different objects have different purposes. Henceforth, we need an efficient cause known as Purusa for creating the objects in this earth from the material cause known as Prakriti. Now, as I said, that earth, water, fire and air cannot be the subtle elements, cannot create the subtle elements in this earth. Hence, they are not considered as the material cause of this cosmos. The ultimate cause of the world must be some unintelligent, unconscious principle which is uncaused, eternal, all pervading, and it is the fine, always ready to produce the world of objects, is known as Prakriti according to Sankhya philosophy. Hence, Prakriti is known as Kaujasui. It is absolute and eternal, because a relative and non-eternal element cannot be the fundamental cause of the world. So far we have discussed all this in a clear manner. Now, question arises, if Prakriti is an eternal and unconscious element, can we produce the conscious element out of this material cause Prakriti? I repeat, the question arises, Prakriti being the ultimate cause, being the sole cause for creating the all objects in this earth, can you claim that Prakriti being an unconscious or jada can able to create the conscious element? Here the question arises, is it possible that a conscious element can be deduced from an unconscious element? Can you get something out of nothing? There Sankhya philosophy introduced the notion Purusa. They said that the Purusa is a pure consciousness, it is eternal, it helps Prakriti to create the different objects in this earth. Being Purusa is a pure consciousness, when they are coming close together, some consciousness, some element of consciousness of Purusa also find in case of conscious object that we see in this earth, animal, reptiles, human beings, etc. Therefore, it is not only Prakriti responsible, it is Purusa and Prakriti, these two eternal reality are responsible for creating both animate and non-animate objects in this world. Henceforth, the existence of Purusa is equally important as like Prakriti. Now we will discuss how Sankhya really explains about Purusa. How will you understand the Purusa? Who is a Purusa? Can Purusa will be perceived or it has to be only inferred? If it is to be inferred, what is the product through which it is to be inferred and why it cannot be perceived? They claim that there is not only one Purusa, because they believe in the plurality of selves. That means there are many selves exist in this earth. If this is so, we could able to see the Purusa. However, Sankhya denies that. They say that we cannot see the Purusa, Purusa only to be realized. Now let us see, let us discuss on Sankhya point of view how they explain the concept Purusa. For them, Purusa is known as self or soul. It is an eternal reality. It has neither beginning nor an end. If it has a beginning, that means it is a product. If there is a product, then it must have an end. It is a perishable, it is durable, and henceforth, if something is very limited, something is relative, something is subject to creation and destruction, how it becomes responsible for creating such a vast and different multiple conscious element in this earth. Henceforth, Purusa, though is a part of this creation of conscious element in this earth, after creation it detaches from that, and henceforth it remains, it is oneness or eternality. Therefore, they said that like Prakriti, Purusa also is an eternal reality. It is cannot be relative, it is beyond to creation and destruction. It is not an object where the consciousness is a quality. It is embedded with pure consciousness, because any consciousness you will take from out of it, still it will have its own consciousness known as pure consciousness. It cannot be impure, it has to be only inferred, because as it said that if Prakriti being the material cause for producing both animate and non-animate objects by the help of Purusa, you see there are different objects, different animals in this earth, and each animal has a different purpose, each animal has a different size, different color, different shapes. If this is so, then Purusa also taken his own time to create the animals for a different purposes. It said that Purusa being responsible for creating the conscious element in this earth is beyond the causality, beyond the cause effect relation, beyond the causal chain. Further they said Purusa is the self, it is the knower, it is the subject. It is the Purusa who enjoys, who creates the objects for a particular purpose, who creates an animal for a particular purpose. It says that the different proportion of gunas in Prakriti should be mixed together to create a animate and inanimate objects in this earth for a particular purpose. They said that Purusa is neither the body nor the mind, neither the ego nor intellect. It cannot be a subtle element. It is not the substance which has the quality of consciousness, rather it embedded with pure consciousness. It is the basis of all knowledge and is the supreme knower. It cannot be the object of knowledge, like we see an object in this earth, we see a computer lies on my table, there is an object, we have a knowledge towards an object. Purusa, it cannot be an objective knowledge for us, because we cannot see it, we cannot touch it, we cannot feel it, we cannot know through our sense experiences. It has to be only inferred. Like an object, it has certain quality. Purusa, though have some quality, supernatural quality, but it is not an object, it is beyond the object. Our knowledge about the Purusa cannot be an objective knowledge, it is a spiritual knowledge. It is an inferential knowledge to identify the supreme reality known as Purusa, who is embedded with pure consciousness. If something like object, then it is a relative and it is subject to creation and destruction, henceforth cannot be responsible for creating the different and multiple conscious element in this earth. Therefore, we conclude that Purusa is an eternal, ubiquitous, all pervading and at the same time embedded with pure consciousness. It is the subject, it is the enjoyer, it is the knower. It knows how things happening in this earth and how things are to be ordered in a particular way, so that things will be fulfill its own purpose. It is the basis, it cannot be the object of knowledge, it is the observer and eternally free, the impartial spectator and peaceful. It is also peaceful while involving in the creation of the animate objects in this earth. It is a peaceful, it remains peace. Any consciousness in the element form you take from the pure consciousness, still the Purusa remain as its pure consciousness. It is beyond the space time continuum, change and activity. Its Prakriti activate, but the Purusa helps the Prakriti to activate. It is self enlightened, we need not to enlighten, we need not to lighten anything to claim that Purusa is an enlightened. It is a self enlightened, it need not take any helps from others to be enlightened. It is self proved and henceforth it is Kajasui. It is all pervading, formless. It is all pervading, it appears in every conscious element that we see in this earth. It is formless, there is no such form that we can see, only objects, relative objects and temporary objects has a form. The eternal element cannot have a form, therefore it is formless. At the same time, it is all pervading. In all conscious element you find there is a consciousness, and Sankhya claimed that some element from Purusa lies in all the conscious element that we see in this earth. Henceforth, they believe Purusa is not a one, but Purusa is many. The self are many in Sankhya philosophy. They said that Purusa also being an eternal, it is found in both animate and non-animate objects. Its existence cannot be doubted, because in its absence all knowledge, even the doubt, is not possible. What this claim is that the knowledge that we gain as a subject, as a conscious element or a conscious human being or a conscious animal, it is because of Purusa. The knowledge that we infer, the knowledge that we gain through our sense experience, or we verify some object and gain some knowledge, this is all our subjective knowledge. Some elements of consciousness in Purusa lies in all animate objects, henceforth we are able to perceive some objects as it is. The tiger can find its food, the human being can find its the rational choice, the reptiles can find its own food, own house, etc., etc. So therefore, some kind of pure consciousness, the Chitta, lies in all animate objects that we see in this earth, and these consciousness are derived from the pure consciousness which is known as Purusa. They say that if you think that Purusa does not exist, then the knowledge itself is impossible, and even we cannot doubt anything, because to doubt on a particular object we need to know about that object. Hence even doubting is also impossible without having the conscious element which is derived from Purusa. So without Purusa, neither knowledge nor even the doubt can also possible. This is the claim made by the Sankhya philosophy. Further they say that it has been described as, the Purusa has been described as devoid of 3 gunas, the sattva, raja, tamas, because these 3 gunas are found with Prakriti. It is inactive, it is an observer, knower, and the nature of illumination. It is a power to illuminate, it is a power to describe, it is a power to give consciousness in the life. It is free from distortions. Its objects changes, but it itself never changes. In this point, what Sankhya claim is that when the conscious element, pure conscious element, helps to produce many conscious elements in this earth that we see, that we infer, in all the cases, the conscious element that we see in case of animal and human beings, that is subject to creation and subject to birth, subject to death, subject to creation and subject to destruction. However, the pure consciousness as such, it is beyond the creation and destruction. When its product, the human being and animals, animate objects in this earth, are subject to birth and death, in the same time Purusa is beyond that causal chain of birth and death. That means, when the product is perishes, when the product is involved in case of cause and effect relation, the Purusa, which is the pure consciousness, is beyond from that cause effect relation, is beyond from that perishable world. Henceforth, it is said that the product itself is a subject to creation and destruction. However, the cause which is responsible for creating that product is beyond that causal effect relation. Now, further they said that it is above self arrogance, aversion and attachment. After creating all the objects in this earth in an both animate and non-animate, it is detached from that. Henceforth, no attachment you find in case of Purusa. If it is attachment, it should be relative. Since it is not having any attachment with any objects, both animate and non-animate, it is pure consciousness and it is eternal. It has to be only inferred. With all this quality, Advaita Vedanta described Purusa as a Sachitananda Swarupa, because Satchitananda means it is one always. Anything you take out from this Purusa, any kind of element of consciousness you take out from the pure consciousness, which is known as Purusa, still it is a one, still all the full consciousness or pure consciousness you find as Purusa. Therefore, it has its own existence, it is self proved, it is Kajasvi. It proves its existence itself, nothing needs to be proved itself. It is called Nistriya Gunya Udasina. Udasina means it just observer, observing everything. It is beyond the negativity, it does not have any gunas that ordinarily you find. It is beyond the sattva, raja, tamas guna. It does not possess these 3 gunas. It is akruta, this means it is formless. It does not have any form, particular form. If it would have been form, we could have able to identify or see the Purusa. Since it is formless, we cannot identify a Purusa or we cannot perceive a Purusa, rather only we have to realize the Purusa through the inferences. And we know the animate objects in this earth, henceforth based on its product we can infer its cause, known as Purusa. It is Sakshi, it is Drashta, it is Sabda, Prakasa, Swarupa and Gyanta. It is become the subject, it is the knower, it is the knowledge that everyone generates, everyone derives from it. The all knowledge that we claim in both animate objects and inanimate objects in this earth. In case of inanimate objects, it is a power to reflect something. Sankhya claim that if a chair color is green, the object chair has some power to reflect the color green. Otherwise, we cannot identify the color of chair as a green. In the same time, a particular animal has its certain features, certain characteristics, certain attitudes. With these features, we identify that object as it is, or that animal as having some particular name. The Sankhya claim that if both animate and inanimate objects have certain element of consciousness, and through the consciousness we know the Purusa, which is a pure consciousness, still they say that this consciousness can be considered as self. Therefore, there are different kinds of self exist. There are variety of self exist, it is not only one self. However, there is only one self which gives certain kind of element of consciousness in other selves. Therefore, there are different selves we find which is and different consciousness we find, and all this consciousness essentially is only one, because all are derived from only one consciousness known as Purusa. Purusa being the knower, being having the knowledge possessor, and also it is the observer. It observes how things happening in this earth. It also observes how the three gunas of Prakriti mix together in a different proportion and produce different objects for a different purposes in this earth. To establish the existence of Purusa, Ishwar Krishna written a sloka in Sankhya Karika. He has also given 5 arguments, the establishing the Purusa, which is known as pure consciousness, eternal, ubiquitous, and Kajasui. Now, let us discuss how Ishwara Krishna proves in Sankhya philosophy. Now, there are 5 arguments given by Ishwara Krishna in his sloka, which is written in Sankhya Karika. These 5 arguments are known as teleological arguments, logical arguments, ontological arguments, ethical arguments, and religious argument or mysterious argument. Now, the first argument, as you can know, that whatever the objects that we find in this earth, Prakriti helps to create this earth, but Prakriti cannot enjoy all these objects. Being an unconscious element, an active element, it cannot enjoy it. It is the pure consciousness which can enjoy all objects in this earth. Otherwise, the use of creation has no meaning. All the substances are created in this earth only for Purusas. The body, intellect, mind, sense organs, all these are the tools of Purusas. With these tools, Purusa creates the different objects in this earth from Prakriti. These 3 gunas of Prakriti, Sattva, Raja, Tamas, all are served to the Purusa. These are the way Ishwar Krishna describes the first argument, that the establishment of Purusa, which is known as teleological. That means, if all objects or variety of objects that you see in this earth, Prakriti is able to produce that objects, for whom? Why Prakriti at all it needs to produce all these objects? It is because of Purusa. In Purusa you find mind, intellect, ego, all the subtle elements, and these are the tools for him. As a result, by using these tools, he creates the different objects in this earth, and all these objects used for their different purposes. The first argument, this is known as teleological. The second argument, they said that substance of the universe are composed of 3 gunas, that is known as Sattva, Raja, Tamas. Who will be the witness that whether these 3 gunas helps to create all objects in this earth? It is the Purusa who will the witness of these 3 gunas, and also know that how these 3 gunas in a proportion mix with each other. As a result, all the objects creates in this earth. While being the witness of these 3 gunas, it is beyond from these 3 gunas. It is just coolly observe that how these 3 gunas are mixing up each other, and also helps to produce a different objects in this earth. Now, this argument is known as a logical argument, or this proof is known as a logical one. The third proof, they said that Purusa is a pure consciousness which is beyond our experience and analysis, because any kind of analysis we do, we cannot explain completely the pure consciousness or known as Purusa. It is the substratum of all knowledge, both positive and negative, because earlier we have discussed that without Purusa, even the knowledge, and we cannot even doubt anything in this earth. To doubt, to identify something even error, we need a knowledge, and which is derived from the Purusa. Therefore, Purusa is the knowledge giver. There can be no experience without him. This is so because he is the sole authority of all experiential knowledge. This is an ontological proof. Now, we have seen the 3 proofs. The first one is teleological, second one is logical, and third one is ontological. In ontological, it is claimed that even we cannot identify an object as it is without Purusa. We cannot doubt even anything without Purusa, because Purusa is a knowledge giver. It has some element of consciousness. If at all we think that we have some element of consciousness that we derive from the pure conscious known as Purusa, and henceforth it is the Purusa in some or other form find in all the conscious elements that we see in this earth. If this is so, then we find that who is really having the pure consciousness. If you find different consciousness in different animate objects in this earth, then who is really the responsible for giving this kind of consciousness? It is nothing but the Purusa. There might be one person who is responsible or who is distributing all this consciousness in different animate objects in this earth. Because Prakriti is a material cause which is unconscious reality or cannot produce any conscious element in this earth. Now, we will see the fourth argument. The fourth argument is known as ethical argument. There he said that Prakriti is unconscious, cannot enjoy her creation. So, it is known as bhogya. Prakriti to be enjoyed, otherwise the whole creation is useless, has no meaning for this earth. Therefore, Prakriti after creation of all these elements, who will be enjoying it? It is the Purusa or Bhokta who is really enjoying the product of Prakriti. This is an ethical argument. If something exists, if nobody uses it, who will be using it? There must be someone who will be using this, and also who know that what objects meant for what purpose. This argument may be considered an ethical one. The last one, they say that there are persons who try to relive in this worldly miseries. There are persons, there are animals who really suffered in their earthly life. They think that they need liberation. They think that they are really indulged with their bondage. So they have done some bad karma. Henceforth, they will be striving to do some good karma, and they wish to achieve the liberation in their earthly life. If at all somebody wish to achieve the liberation in earthly life, someone needs to pray, someone needs to have power to give that liberation. And here Sankhya claims that it is nothing but the supernatural power or pure conscious which is known as Purusa. Purusa has a power to give the liberation to all the animal, all these animate objects in this earth. If we pray to Purusa, Purusa is responsible. Purusa will be giving the liberation to all of us. Henceforth, the consciousness that we lies, which is derived from Purusa, can also be protected. With these 5 arguments, Sankhya establishes the existence of Purusa. The first one is ontological, second one is logical, third one is teleological, fourth one is ethical, and the fifth one is known as religious based or mystical. These are the 5 arguments through which Sankhya established that the existence of Purusa. They further said it is not only one Purusa, because the existence of conscious element that we find in different animals, objects of in this earth, henceforth they believe in plurality of selves or Purusa. All the Purusa, further they said that though there are different consciousness you find in different animals in this earth, they said that all these selves, all these consciousness are identical in their essences, because all are derived from the pure consciousness or known as Purusa. They said that consciousness is found in all selves, because while creation, it is Purusa helps the Prakriti to create the animate objects. Hence, for some kind of elements from Purusa derived and enter into the conscious elements in this earthly life. They said that this is the view of Sankhya philosophy, which is also agreed by Mimamsikas and Jainism, because Mimamsikas and Jainism, they believe that there is not only one self, rather there are different selves, there are variety of selves exist in this earth. Now, while claiming that Purusa in one hand is a super conscious being, it is a pure consciousness, it is eternal, it is Kajasui. In the other hand, it distributes some portions of conscious element in different animate objects that we find in this earthly life. Now, question arises, what are the proofs for claiming that there are plurality of selves exist? Because Samkhya, in one hand they claim that there are different consciousness we find in different animate objects, which is derived from the pure consciousness. At the same time they said that there is only one consciousness which is responsible for distributing the small element of consciousness in different animate objects in this earth. Now, question arises, if Samkhya at all believes the plurality of selves, what are the proofs they have given for that? Now, the first proof, they say that there are different objects, the different animals exist in this earth. Different animal has a different tendencies, different attitudes. If there is only one Purusa, that means all selves will be acting in the same way. If one conscious element will be blind, it will follow that all the conscious element will be blind. If one human being will be blind, it means that all other human beings should be blind, but which is not the case. The further said that if there is only one consciousness and all the consciousness that we find, it is a replica from, it is derived from this pure consciousness. That means if somebody is incapable to do something, it cannot be done by any other person, but which is not the case. Therefore, they say that there is a existence of plurality of self. Different people work differently, different people think differently, different animals behave differently. The second argument, they said that if there were not different animate objects in this earth, if one animate objects die, that means all animate objects has to be die. If one animal will die, it simply means that since there is one and only one pure conscious Purusa, all animals have to be die, which is not the case. The birth and death and the sensory activity of all individuals are different from each other. If there were no more than one Purusa, then all would have been died in one diet. That means when one diet, all has to be died, and when one birth, all has to be taken the birth, but which is not the case. As I said that different conscious element, different animals have different tendencies and different way of behaving, henceforth it is implies that there are many Purusas. The fourth point, they said that if there are no different Purusas or different selves, that means if one person gets liberation, it implies that everyone gets liberation. If one person attached with a bad karma, having the bondage with a causal relation, it implies that all animal objects find in this earth also having the same bondage, which is not the case. When one person died, other persons are alive. So, therefore, it implies that even for the liberation case, if one gets liberation, others need not get liberation. Henceforth, it implies that the existence of plurality of selves. The fifth point, they said that in Prakriti we find three gunas, and Purusa with its tool, that is mind, intellect, ego, and with all and a few sort of subtle elements. See that how those three gunas, sattva, raja, tamas, mix up with each other in a different proportion to produce a different objects. Since sattva, raja, tama has a mix up with each other in a different proportionate, we produce different objects, and therefore it believes that there are different souls exist in this earth, and henceforth there are plurality of selves, they claim. So, these are the five arguments through which Samkhya establishes that this is not only one Purusa, but there are different and multiple Purusa exist in this earth. Now, some criticisms have made against the argument the Samkhya has given for the existence of Purusa. It is the Samkhya system has confused to differentiate between the worldly being with the unqualified and eternal Purusa. Because what does Samkhya try to argue when Samkhya says that all Purusas having different conscious element, and if one Purusa die, it means other Purusa die. It is all are in a materialistic world. However, the Samkhya Purusa tells about also spiritual reality known as Purusa. Purusa which is cannot be explained, has to be only inferred, only has to be realized. It is beyond the objectivity. It is beyond the objectivity of our knowledge. It is beyond the creation and destruction. beyond the subject and objectivity of knowledge. In one hand, Sankhya saying that about the pure consciousness, and in other hand they are dealing with the material consciousness which is found in this earthly life. Therefore, the criticism made against Sankhya saying that Sankhya may be confused to differentiate between the eternal pure consciousness in one hand and plurality of selves in other hand. The second criticism made against Sankhya is that Sankhya, they have given and proved Purusa as a practical and a psychological being, but not as a spiritual soul, because if it is a spiritual soul, they cannot say that if one person will be blind, others animals has to be blind. If one person get liberated, other person has to be liberated. The third criticism they put against Sankhya, saying that how can the spiritual self be many and the recipient of experience? They say that if the Purusa is a pure consciousness, if Purusa is the self, if Purusa is eternal, how can you claim that it needs some experience like an earthly human beings? It possesses some consciousness like an animal that he or she has in this earthly life. So Purusa, being an eternal, being a pure consciousness, it should be far away from all the animate objects in this earth. The criticism also made to Sankhya philosophy, saying that how can you claim that there are material Purusa exist and at the same time the spiritual Purusa exist? When you say material Purusa, there are different kind of Purusa. There are Purusa which is involved in the causal chain of cause and effect relation, subject to birth and death. In the same time, how can you say that there is a pure consciousness which is beyond this causality, cause effect relation, and beyond this birth and death? So therefore, there is a confusion can be seen in Sankhya's argument, while they say that there is only one Purusa and we find other consciousness element which is known as different selves or different Purusa, and all this consciousness derived from the pure consciousness or Purusas. So in this case, the criticism made against Sankhya is very crucial. The third criticism made against Sankhya philosophy, stating that how can the spiritual self be many and the recipient of experience? They said that if pure consciousness is spiritual, how can a spiritual entity find in a different elements, and the same time these different elements have different purposes? A spiritual entity cannot be perceived, cannot be known through our sense experience. It has to be inferred. It has to be known through the different animate objects in this earth. If this is so, then how the pure conscious or Purusa have the experience of everything? It should be beyond the experience. If one needs to have experience, that should be limited, relative, and like human beings who is in the space-time continuum. But Purusa, being the devoid of space-time continuum, it cannot have the experience. So these are the three criticisms that you find against Sankhya philosophy. Against Sankhya, when they establish the theory of causation, against Sankhya, when they said that the evolution starts when Purusa comes closer with Prakriti, and Purusa, being the pure consciousness, is watching or being observer that how the three gunas of Prakriti mix with each other in a different proportionate and the objects of the world produced. The criticism also made that Prakriti cannot be just an independent observer. If it is an independent observer, then how it will be lies in different objects, animate objects in this earth? How can the elements of that pure consciousness distributed in different animate objects in this earth, and this different animate behaves differently? They have a different attitudes, and if one animal died, it does not mean that all the animal died. If one animal get birth, it does not mean that all the animal take their birth. In this case, These are the arguments posed against Sankhya, all this criticism made against Sankhya philosophy when they are trying to establish the plurality of selves. In this class, I believe you have understood Purusas and what is the role of Purusa for creation of the animate objects in this earth, how Purusa Prakriti involved really for creating the objects of this earth. Prior to that, we have also discussed Satkaryavada, the principle, the doctrine that believe Sankhya philosophy for establishing the existence of all the objects in this universe. We have also discussed who is the material cause, who is the sole responsible, what is the real material cause for creating the different objects in this earth, known as Prakriti. So, after this discussion, now we will be discussing further that how Purusa and Prakriti really comes together for getting the things produced that we find in different form in this earth. Whether anyone forcing this Purusa and Prakriti to come together, or they comes together with each other, because Prakriti as a nature is unconscious and a material cause. Purusa, in the other hand, is a pure consciousness. In these two extreme concerns of two eternal reality, whether they comes close together by themselves automatically, or is it some spirit or some other person responsible for creating their closeness with each other. Now, that we will be discussing in the next class, that how evolution starts, what are the things are responsible for creating the different objects in this earth, how Purusa and Prakriti comes close together. Thank you.